Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Asymmetric Habits today with my good friend JP, Jonathan Pishner of Apex Counseling, and then myself, Jerry Handy, Viking Performance Training. So today we're talking about a favorite topic of a lot of people, nervousness, nerves. So it's something that, we all feel at some point in time. Like we're all very familiar with what it feels like to just be nervous. But it's brought this up because there's just several different ways that I feel like it manifests itself. Lots of causes for nervousness, but then also the results, the consequences, I should say, a lot of times are people tend to make decisions based on the nervousness rather than what's actually making them nervous or what they could and should do. So first off, JP, you wanted to go over it a little bit, but I think a lot of people, myself wondering, is like, what kind of causes that nervousness? Like what brings it up?
One of the things I'm going to jump a step ahead to something that exacerbates it than
Mhm.
actually answer your question. One of the things about this is a lot of people think they should have absolute stoic confidence around everything, and when that happens, it often has a tendency to make people more anxious if they experience any small level of anxiety whatsoever. So there's a piece of this where a lot of people go into it with a belief that's actually erroneous in the first place, which causes it to get worse. But there's, unlike I usually do, I'm going to lead with the most important thing, so that the useful habit is stated 5 minutes in. The body does not do a very good job in its feedback of like telling us what our emotions are exactly, um, and it doesn't do a good job of differentiating between nervousness and alertness and excitement.
Ooh.
Because if you think of the physiological responses that are associated with any of those three emotions, they're all the same. You have kind of a heightened state of present moment clarity. You usually have a change to your breathing. You usually have different sorts of excited nervous system sensations. Some people will describe a tingling sensation either along their skin or in their stomach. Some people will experience a bit of a heady feeling. And all three of these have extraordinarily similar physiological responses. So, what happens to a lot of people is they think they're nervous when in fact maybe they're not. Sometimes they're just excited. Sometimes they're just like on high alert, which is a bit of a neutral emotion to a certain degree. But then we actually think of like, oh, what am I experiencing? Oh, well, I've got this sensation in my stomach and my heart rate is increasing. I must be scared. Therefore, a lot of people accidentally end up shifting into a mode of scared or fear or anxious when that's not actually the place they started. And so really, this in a way this sounds banal because it's hard to describe how to actually do this. But one of the things I very first start talking to people about is if this happens to them is to just try and actually go into your awareness with those three things and say, wait, am I scared or am I excited or am I just alert? That by itself, before you do anything else, actually has a lot of power and can clear up a lot of nervousness for a lot of people.
Would you say that's similar to, once you look into it and kind of try to answer that question for yourself, similar to stopping and, taking some deep breaths, trying to calm yourself down? Like, would that be the logical next step at that point? Especially once you find out once you decide that it's not an actual fear-based response right now and it's possibly one of the others? I will.
If it's actual fear, usually yeah, taking deep breaths and trying to interrupt the physiological response is good. Uh, if you say, oh no, wait, I'm actually excited, most people can then shift into the emotional state of excitement. They
Oh,
don't
I
need
see.
to do anything.
Okay.
Or,
Yeah,
or,
that's
or if you
exactly
or
what I
if
was
you're just on high alert, like if you're on high alert, but there's a good reason to be on high alert, like oh my God, I have to deliver this 20-minute speech and I've got to remember these 77 bullet points and I've got to really be on my thing.
thinking.
There's not really a lot of reason to shift out of a certain level of that high alertness as long as it's not too elevated.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that because I didn't realize I didn't expect it to just be able to kind of shift like that through identifying it. So these are
Yeah,
some.
and it's bizarre. Like I really wish I could describe like a mechanism by which that happens. But brain science, just as far as I know, unless really new research has come out, it just isn't far enough along. But that awareness, and matter of fact, if you sat in my counseling room and tally marked the number of times that awareness was actually the intervention, you would come away with a ton of tally marks, even at the like clinical level of intervention.
What's funny is that's actually the first thing I tell people at the gym too. Literally the first thing whenever teaching techniques or trying to correct them is I just want them to become aware of it, that they're doing it, and actually hit to the point to where they notice it and can tell me yes. Because most bad movements people do in the gym are, it's their habit, it's their natural movement, so they don't realize that it's something wrong or what it even feels like. It's just like if I tell somebody, pick something up off the ground, they're going to do it the way that they think is right. And if I'm telling them that they say they need to straighten their back out or push their knees out, something like that, they can't even do that until they actually realize what it feels like to not be that way. So yeah, like
Yeah,
that awareness is the exact same first step. Like we have to make our clients at the gym aware before we can actually teach them what to do correctly. So exactly. So the way I think of it, there's like there are different types of nervousness in a way, like maybe type's not the right word, but things that kind of create it or those situations. There's nervousness for like new things, like new things you have to do or are coming up, just the new, let's call it new nervousness. I don't know. Then there's also nervousness for things that you're actually that you're experienced at, but maybe haven't had fantastic success with. But then there's also nervousness sometimes that come up from things that you're actually pretty good at, but simply maybe the size, the scope, or just maybe initially there was nervousness the first time, so you still have it as like a conditioned response.
hmm
Um, then I feel like there's nervousness around achieving something new again, and something that you've done, but like an achievement style. Um, and then there's nervousness around people that you're I guess like responsibility nervousness, like either in terms of, I mean, you're just taking more responsibility for yourself, moves you got to do, financial moves, maybe can I afford this house, etc. or or then like being around people, like that. So I feel like there's a lot of different types here. I'm just curious. That's one of those things I'd be curious to see, like if you guys, like as counselors, have a more specific organization for these things, or how you guys that kind of work with it all.
Yeah, honestly, what we would usually do is we kind of figure out what are the pattern of events for a specific person. But if we're talking to a large group, like in this format, we'd almost shy away from saying like, okay, this event causes nervousness, this event causes nervousness, and we'd really more kind of get into a place of let's assume events themselves don't cause emotions, that something within you causes the emotion, because we can take you and me, put us through the exact same event or stressor, and have completely different emotional responses. So usually we would say like, okay, let's assume that this is not just the event outside of a few very specialized things, but what is it within you that's triggering some sort of response of fear? So like we talked about being aware of, is this excitement or alertness? Now we're going to assume it's actually some sort of fear. So what within you is triggering the fear? Uh, 99% of the time, I might be overstating that, but certainly a large percentage of the time. Now, let me not get into specific numbers because I like being more precise than that. It will be one of the two most common irrational beliefs. So, like whenever I work cognitive work with people, you get into people's belief systems. And there are some beliefs that are so common that there's kind of a list of some of the most common ones. And number one and two are almost always sources of some type of fear. Number one is, it is an absolute necessity that I be loved and approved of by everyone around me.
Mm.
Number two is, it is an absolute necessity that I be thoroughly competent, adequate, and achieving in everything I do. A dramatic percentage of the time, if you are having nervousness about getting into your next thing, you are carrying some version of one of those two beliefs. Either
Yeah.
you're about to go do something and you're worried that there's like, no matter how many people cheer, there's gonna be that one dude in the crowd that boos. You're gonna be worried about that. So that's the love and appreciation one. Or you're gonna worry like, okay, I'm gonna do almost all of it right, but I'm gonna make this tiny little mistake, and that tiny little mistake means I'm a giant screw up and I suck and everyone hates me. And
Yeah, we're such a perfectionist society mentally. I think there's just not nearly enough appreciation for how not realistic that is, and how that's actually the way it's, I mean, sort of like supposed to go, and is still, and is quite good. Because I said,
yeah,
especially like, we almost beat this to death, but it's worth saying almost every single time we get on here and talk. But especially now where it's you in essence see highlights, or you see complete destruction. Like we see very little of all the things in the middle, because of just, like the highlights are social media over and over again. And then so many news cycles tend to focus on like complete and utter disaster, because again, ratings. So there's so little attention given to the different pieces in the middle, where we get to see people do actual human things, get human results, real human achievement. And then even that part, like, I'm obviously starting to shift towards that second one talking about this, but like about the, I must do everything perfectly. But even when we're seeing people succeed, we tend to focus so much on that final consequence, whatever we're defining success as, rather than paying any attention to all the times leading up to that, to where they messed up, they failed, they learned something new, maybe they got stressed out, and maybe they had to take a break, like all those things that almost every person who has reached whatever achievement has done on the way there. We're just wired to just look straight past that, look at where they are, and be like, oh, what, wow, or whatever it is. So
yeah, of course, we get that through, just like you were saying. Even back in the '80s and '90s, you could turn on ESPN and you get the highlight reel. Social media has made it way worse. In a way, sometimes I wonder if that's not the charm of like certain things, like where people will watch video game streamers and stuff, because you actually get to see the screw ups.
that's a really good point. That's
Yeah,
a really
I
good
mean,
point.
I don't know. I'm presenting a hypothesis, but like,
I
it
mean,
wouldn't
yeah,
shock me to learn that.
yeah, but that's I actually like really enjoy that hypothesis, because that's really cool, especially as a gamer. So
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who has a practice in town, Adrian Ferreira, and he posts videos of him skateboarding, but like it's him learning stuff. So I mean, there's like 9 videos of him failing at kickflips. And it's what, like, I'm watching this, I'm like, this is terrific, because this is exactly what people need to see. And then like, 15 videos from now, he's going to be executing them like really, really well. But you have the progress there too, that people can see, like, oh my God, this took forever. Not like he just showed up and he was Tony Hawk.
So, speaking for anybody who may doubt our occasional nerd credentials, when we talk about things like streaming, I don't think I told you, because I don't think I've seen you, but I got a video game tattoo.
Oh, what am I looking at here? I can't see it properly.
Not done yet, and it'll be colored. Let me get on there. But it's the 4 main characters from Breath of Fire. Well, one of the main characters, Final Fantasy VI, and then Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana. My 4
Oh
favorite.
man, okay, yeah, I'll have to see it in person because it's not high res enough.
Yeah,
But
it's not going to work well here, but
I'm glad you included Chrono Trigger in there, because I was going to have beef with you if you didn't.
oh yeah, I'm excited by that. So the 4 games have shaped my life. So, and we did lots of watching each other play, my friends and I, and watching each other
Yeah,
fail a lot. So goes right in with it. So it's funny, like one of the things that actually, like, this made me think about, if there was one thing that I could change, say for the whole world, and involving like just the quest towards excellence in whatever it is that they have in mind, like, every type of excellence. I don't mean it has to be world class. I mean simply, you want to become a better cook, you want to become better at spending more quality time with your kids, you want to become a better athlete, you want to get a starting job, whatever it would be. For if I could snap my fingers and make it so that everybody actually focused on and enjoyed the journey itself, rather than always worrying about where they're going. Like I said, like that's where so much of like that misunderstanding comes from. The the like misguided measurements for how long what they think it takes to get there. Like
Mhm.
so much happens because there's focused so much on what we think the end is or see from other people and think we see, that there's so little understanding of what it actually of basically how simple it is to get there. Again, like not not easy. We never want to confuse those two things, but just it really is just applying consistency, learning from things that you like, learning from experience, learning from failures, learning from things that go well, and applying those things in like every
So
area.
let me ask you a question about that because there's a valuable thing here. Because one of the things that I was proposing with those two irrational beliefs is like looking into the future and saying, "Oh my God, I have to do it this way, or else I'm something." And you're saying like, "Okay, be in the present moment. Let whatever happens be okay." Essentially, is roughly what you're saying.
Yep.
You know, I know how I achieved that. How did you get to a place of like, because you also you're a wonderful person to ask this of because you also carry that perfectionistic type of thinking, and so you kind of have to carry the dual thinking of I want everything to be exactly right, and if it's not, that bothers me, and also this present moment is fine. So like, how have you achieved that balance? I wonder if there's anything we can extract from that for the listeners.
Yeah, for me, I would say two things mainly. One was putting myself in something to where fail like I had to fail a lot.
We're
And
going to bookmark that and come back to it because there's something important to extract from that.
okay, like I mean, because I started training, and training would be part of that, although because I was doing it most of it on my own for so long, like I would say if anything, I learned that slowly in that process and just try to keep learning more about it. But the one that really brought it to my forefront was for me um, when I started martial arts. Because like I had played baseball, I'd played some basketball before then. I've always been terrible at basketball, by the way. But like I played those, but for me, the one that really like clicked in my mind was martial arts, especially like well, yeah, just in general, but especially having a fairly good like high sparring component for me, just because that was where like I could tell that I was getting better at things, but I was still like getting quote unquote, well, sometimes actually beat up or just beat in general, you know, over and over again. But I could see over time the things that were still like, even though my end result was like, hey, surprise, I still lost to my instructor. It's like I could tell where I was getting a little bit better and it wasn't happening as quickly, or it was, maybe I even landed a strike on them, like that type of improvement. That was the biggest one for me, I think, that actually started changing the way that I thought and acted about myself. Because for me, that big change definitely happened in high school when I was training. The other part of it has been like reading, reading and consuming a lot. So I would say for me that part, like when I started finally getting back, like roughly 6-7 years ago now, to just taking in books and started podcast again. Like a lot of the books I read or podcasts I listened to were based on business. First, it was business development, then growing to like say where self development is a better term, um, and just at least the ones that I liked and was what was feeling was like communicating with and vibing with were all like that message was in there somewhere. Like if a book seemed to be almost too good to be true type thing, I never connected with it and probably didn't even finish it.
So,
So for me,
so, so let me phrase that differently. It sounds like you collected a lot of stories of people failing and being fine.
mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. And not in like I said, books, everything, but also like just people. Either some people I know, eventually meeting people, but like I mean, it sounds almost crazy to say, but yeah, just like historical figures. I've always been a history nerd too, and I just love the either whether it's a tragic hero or underdog, and really like I think it's one of the best things I think that's one of the reasons people like underdog stories so much is they feel like they relate to it because they see that underdog fail. They don't think they're somewhat, people don't think they can win, etc. But they either do it or in some cases just come close. But nevertheless, it's still that inspiring tale, that inspiring story, because they see people go through all that fear, the failures, maybe even hitting rock bottom and bouncing
Yeah.
back up and doing it. Like for
Yeah,
me,
I know I've said it a lot before. That's one of the reasons I love the Rocky movies so much. It's
well,
not
speaking of rock,
they're not
yeah,
particularly well written as far as like stories go, but they're wonderfully written as far as here is how a human being really does things. Like they screw up their
yes,
life and they get it together some, and they screw it up again and they get it together, and it's like such a wonderful story of like somebody who made it, whatever that means, but like really still had glaring flaws along the way. That's why I love those so much. So we turn this into something usable because you said two wonderful things here, and that's honestly roughly what I would put together for most people if we were going to say, okay, how do I not be nervous when I'm going into stuff? Well, you're exposing yourself to failure and having to deal with it. And you're also collecting stories and have been forever of people who failed at something and were fine. Uh, the exposure part, you know, I always get nervous whenever I like, have to agree with certain aspects of pop psychology. But like, one of the things you hear those life coaches and stuff being like, fail at something every day. There's an element of something to that because one of the things that the people will make up is that eventually you should never have that. And being continually exposed to it does inoculate you somewhat to being nervous over this talk I'm about to give. So if I was going to like create a habit for somebody, it would be expose yourself to places where you'll have to not be as good, and you'll be seen to not be as good, as long as it's not completely overwhelming. And the reason I have to speak to that part is because I work with people with social anxiety, and usually by the time people get to me, they have fairly severe social anxiety if I'm working with them, to the point where the idea of like buy something at the cash register and have that interaction might very nearly be overwhelming. And so, whatever a person selects, it has to be like not in the overwhelming realm. And so, if a person has to work with a counselor, it's probably the exposure needs to be shrunk really small. For most people listening to this, hopefully the exposure won't have to be shrunk nearly that small, but it might be just as simple as I get an exposure every time I hit that stupid publish button whenever I'm about to post a YouTube video or Instagram or it's kind of why I'm glad you hit the publish button on these because it takes it off of me. But I feel that little sense every single time, but it does make it just a little bit easier to click that publish button the next time.
what's funny is like it's funny the different senses you get, because for me, it's the idea of like I've almost decided that my own rule of the universe is that like, okay, if I think this is going to be amazing, it's probably really not, and like 5 people are going to like it, or if that many. But if it's something that I wrote that I just started not knowing what to write about and ended up putting 15, like just doing it that way, that's the one that'll probably hit people. And it just get used to that. But like all of it, just kind of get used to so many of these things. So one of the things that
But actually, let's notice something to extract from that because back to your thought process creates some of your nervousness. Uh, you kind of knowing like, oh, I have no idea how this is going to land on people, and that's fine, is actually a nice thing that inoculates you from some of that nervousness. So I guess the habit we're really talking about is like find a story to tell yourself that is true. You're not allowed to lie to yourself. That helps you kind of swallow that nervousness a little more easily. Like it doesn't go down quite so harsh.
yeah. Uh, Another one that I go with a lot, that I tell myself a lot and remind myself, and this is definitely only a well, no, again, this goes back a long ways, but just because you learn it one way doesn't necessarily mean you will learn it to apply it in other ways. I feel like that grows too. Is when I do fail or something, or just have something not go as well as I want to, I'm pretty good these days at messaging at my own message to myself. that's one more way that I learned how to make it a little bit better. Like I have become actively better at thinking in that way. That every time I do it is a learning experience, and that I can and that I can improve upon it, and that through that continuous trial and learning and applying things I've learned, I will eventually get the outcomes that I want. So like I'm a big believer in that, and that's the story that I am at now. And again, that's one where again I learned that 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I started martial arts. But back then, in training, in strength training as well. But back then, I pretty much only it was that story was in that box. It was like this is going to be physical training, this is martial arts, but I never thought of it that way applied in other situations. Like it wasn't until a couple years ago, a few years ago, maybe at most, that I would say I actually started like taking that type of story and applying it to business or myself in other ways. So I mean, that was a 20-year gap of basically learning the same lesson, but applying it in a very specific sense into a more what I'm working on now sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so it's crazy how like specific those things were.
So we think of habits we have so far. Emotional awareness will help with nervousness a lot.
Yeah, and speaking of, I want to actually throw something before you go into a list there because
Yeah.
that is a huge one. Actually, I thought about it. Like for me, a lot of what I've felt as quote unquote nervousness is that because like there are like for example, speaking in front of people. You know, that's a huge fear in general. But not even that. Like for me, like it would be the times I do that the most, well, now it's like this, like, or, any form of live video. Like a lot of people are terrified of doing live videos on Facebook, So, but live speaking in front of people like this, or for me, speaking in front of, say, teams or groups at the gym, um, and speaking in front of classrooms at times. Like those are the top 3 times now that I speak in front of people. And I've been doing all of like I was a classic introvert way back when, and like evolved like, but I had to work with people and just eventually became better at that. Like that's a different story. But nevertheless, I hit a point to where I knew, like, no, not didn't think. I was like, I know that I'm very good at these things. I was like, I'm very good at talking to a team, at getting them going, at telling them what I want. I said, it's like, I know that. Like, it's like, I can improve. I can always improve, but I know I'm really good at that. I also know that if it's a subject that I'm passionate about, that I'm very good at getting up in front of a group of like a classroom of several hundred people, who knows, and talking about it without like just because it's like, I know I've got it. I know I'm passionate about it. These are things I'm absolutely solid on. And like, nevertheless, I will still before those moments feel that like that elevation in everything, the heart rate, everything. It comes with, well, yeah, it comes with psychosomatic components like that excitement, the jitteriness. I might even feel ill right before it happens. I might feel, it might be an increase in like, oh, I just peed. Why do I have to pee again? I need to get on the, like, I need to get out to the class in 2 minutes, or it could be an illness, but all those things, it comes with psychosomatic components. And the only way that I basically like realizing that I am good at those things is basically is like, okay, like I know it's not fear because of that. So this is just like some sort of heightened physical me that has to deal with this like excitement of getting ready for this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like it's like every time.
And doing the emotional awareness thing. Matter of fact, this is a good thing for a parallel example. I don't know if you've ever noticed one of the things that happens very easily is if it's hot, people get more angry more quickly. Well, if you think the body doesn't do necessarily a good job of differentiating between its sensations, what's the number one physical sensation people have when they get angry? Their body gets hot.
Hmm.
But if you turn up the temperature in the room, the body is now hot and it's already starting the anger subroutine, not because you have anything to be angry about. It's just like, oh, hot, I must be angry. And so the emotional awareness piece like actually works in that parallel example, because like, wait, hold on, am I mad about something, or is my body just hot right now?
That's
Because
really cool. And I
yeah,
want to use I want
we
to
even
use
use
that.
that language whenever people get angry. We use the word they got hot. They got hot about that.
Yeah,
You know, when somebody's angry, what do you tell them to do? Go cool off.
I want to totally use that as a reason to keep every room I'm in colder from now on. It's like, sorry, we got to turn it back down to 60. Sorry, in check. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that makes total sense. But again, one of those things I just never thought about. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so anyway, you were going over the different things we've covered so far.
Yeah. So it was emotional awareness. Noticing what it is that are you carrying a belief that is exacerbating nervousness, and I had the third one in my head when I started that.
Sorry.
What was the third one that we talked about? It was between those two.
Um, I guess we'll just have to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, it'll come to me here in a second. But the reason I brought it up is because I was going to say, like, is there anything else that seems like it would be a good small habit to assist with large amounts of nervousness? Because those are the three I kind of came in
Mhm. So what would be the biggest? So let's say, okay, people like have started understanding, like look at the emotional awareness exercise whenever they start to feel nervousness. Let's say that they come down to the fact where it's like, no, like I'm actually worried about this. Like it's an actual worry, fear. Like what are then some habits for in people in those situations just to help get through whatever it is that's making them feel that way.
with. Before I answer that, exposure was the third one. Sorry. Uh,
Oh, yeah, okay.
uh,
Yeah, right. Mhm.
yeah. Okay. Habits to get people through the whenever it is a true worry. Well, two of them we've already spoken to, which is exposure and working with the thoughts. I think everything else I would say is almost just fine tuning pieces of that, and usually it would be on the thought side, because usually if we have fear, we have some version in our head of it's not going to be fine, it's not going to be okay. Uh, and I think really for most people, if they can find some way to tell themselves the true story of it's going to be okay, uh, and it's very rare that that's not 100% accurate. Like if you're a heart surgeon and you have shaky hands, like, okay, your worry is now legitimate because it might actually not be okay. Uh, but like, you're going to go give a talk. What's the absolute worst thing that happens? Like, okay, a few people chuckle behind your back at the next staff meeting. 3 months later, everybody's forgot
Mhm.
about it. You go and you play your big game, and you biff it.
Mhm.
Unless it's the Super Bowl, nobody's going to remember. You're not going to be on ESPN on the highlight reel, because it's not like they, you know, well, I don't know. Maybe on YouTube there's some random channel that does like 100 worst fails of college athletics, but realistically, you're not going
Right.
to end up on that channel probably. Because so a lot of it's finding a way to tell yourself the story of like the horrible thing I'm envisioning is probably not going to come to pass. If there's a real chance it could come to pass, I don't have good advice for you that I could dispense like in a large format like this, because it then becomes super individualized. Uh,
Right.
but
Right.
most of it's simply not going to come to pass.
I think the exercise of the what's the worst that can actually happen is way more valuable than people think. Because again, what they're really afraid of is usually that, but if they actually even think about it, they realize that it's usually at like in most cases at worst it's going to be a pretty temporary, fleeting thing. Like you said, there's definitely some like very real ones that mean you want to take more time to like think on something or figure something out. But otherwise, it actually reminded me. It was like I think I told you about this a few months ago, but it was a book I really liked that I listened to called "The Power of Regret" by Daniel Pink, and it was basically just going over just, I mean, again, the very real human emotion of regret, and like one of those general ideas that people have now is like, oh, we want to have a regret-free life, no regrets. And again, it doesn't really work that way. And it might not even be something we want, because then you miss out on so many aspects to come from it. I don't want to go like, read it several months ago, recommend it. But one of the exercises I like this, I mean, he brought that very exercise up, and in his case, I remember he talked about some friends, who were like amazing friends their whole life, from childhood and on, and like a good ways into adulthood, who had that one big falling out that causes people not to speak for years or basically forever. And he had two different examples of in the book of friendships who, in one case, after 25 years, one of the women that he was helping, just he talked about that as, like, what is the worst that can happen is you may not get to talk to this person again. And like, if you try to, because in this case, it was like, do I cross the gap and try to apologize, or simply say like, sorry this happened, would love to be friends again? And it was like, okay, plus side, you get your friend back. Minus side, they're like, no, I don't want that again, and like, but the real negative side would be like, this would never happen, and you may not get this chance again. And I had examples of people who went and tried it, and they managed to rekindle their friendships because they found out people were feeling the same way. But then it also had people who didn't do it, and then like the person died before they ever got a chance to, and then they had that they had that whole just feeling the whole time through the rest of their life. Man, this didn't, like, I never got to do this the way that I wanted to.
Well, and that's a wonderful example of kind of like finding a way to tell yourself it'll be okay. Because in that example, you reach out to somebody who you want to rekindle a relationship with, and one of two things happens. Either it works, or there's no net change. You already don't have a relationship with them. It can't get worse. They're not going to drive to your house and shoot your dog. Like,
yeah, I'm so glad you put it that way, because earlier where I gave examples of the like got to be completely competent type of fear, and like these are great examples of the I want everybody to love me thing. But exactly, like, so many people think about that, like, oh, there's nothing here, but somehow not having, if I try it and nothing happens, it's going to be worse. It's like, no, it's probably really not.
no net change, at least in that example.
And like, once you get past that, and again, like, if you feel if you like, it's completely normal to feel like, if you have anything like that, whether it's that big or smaller, to feel, some sadness, like maybe dejected a little bit, like that's going to be normal, but it is going to pass. And not only, and when it does, then you're going to not have that. You're not going to have that in your mind anymore. So that weight's not going to be on your shoulders. So you're no longer going to have that what if, that nervousness of like, I don't know if I ever want to do that, because you tried it, it worked or it didn't, and now you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
life is weird, man.
Life is weird.
So, all right, brother. Anything else you want to add to this?
No, I think that's a number of hopefully usable points. But now a good distinction to make is, if you experience nervousness before certain types of events, and you take a few of these points and they're fairly helpful to you, then terrific. If you experience a lot of nervousness and it's getting in the way, and you take these points and it does absolutely nothing, probably a signal you need more like specialized individual attention to it. Might be worth like seeing counseling is right, and see if you have anxiety or something, because hopefully this is useful for most people. But what I would hate to take away, because remember, irrational belief number 2, I must be thoroughly competent, adequate, and achieving. Oh, the 2 bearded guys said how to get rid of my nervousness, and I did, and I tried it, and it didn't work. There must be something wrong with me. So I'd hate people to take that away, have that be the takeaway if they try this. Some just needs more specialized attention than these little like broad points that we're given.
That's true. And actually, like the whole point of this last 40 minutes is that, it's not about necessarily actually getting rid of the nervousness. It's just it's just about understanding it's okay. It's completely natural. And that really it's just something you say you become aware of, acknowledge, and then pretty much go decide to do the thing or not anyway.
Yep.
That's it.
So awareness, exposure, trying to tell yourself a different story.
Awesome. Great stuff, brother. All right, everybody. Thanks again for listening. Hope this helps some of you out. If you know anybody who could listen, who could get something out of it, please give it a share or comment them on. As always, we're available for any questions you might have. You want to reach out to us. Catch you guys later.
See y'all.